I am so excited about today's video because I found a gem. What's up, people? My name is King James and you're welcome to today's video. Today I'm going to be reacting to a video that I found by my man Peterson, where he, in a conversation with his wife, really explained and broke down beautifully why cohabitation doesn't work. Every single point that was made in the video is a gem, and honestly, I am beyond excited. Let's get right into it.
Can you please elaborate on why you advise against cohabitation before marriage?
Well, so why would I advise against cohabitation before marriage? Well, the simple answer to that question is there's plenty of evidence that it's a bad idea. And I just mean factual evidence to begin with, although I think there are other reasons. People who live together and then get married are more likely to get divorced, not less likely. And that's a really interesting fact because it flies in the face of what you might think of as a kind of pragmatic common sense, because you might think, well, you don't buy a car without taking it out for a test drive. Right, and everyone laughs because that seems obvious, but then, woman's not a car. And neither is a man, and really, seriously, really not an object.
You know why this first point is so important? I teach. So usually when I have conversations with people, I use analogies a lot. And one thing that frustrates me when I use an analogy is when somebody tells me that I am not the thing that you used in the analogy. And it's like, bro, I know it's an analogy. I'm just using it to explain a concept. When I say you reap what you sow, I'm not calling you a farmer. So it used to frustrate me when people would respond with like literally what he responded with now, like a woman is not a car. Those kind of responses used to frustrate me because I'm like, no, you're missing the point. I'm talking about the concept. But when he said it, this was the first time literally that I understood why that try it before you buy it idea is such a bad analogy. Because genuinely, sex is much more costly than test driving a car. A car is not at risk of getting pregnant when you take it for a test drive. Secondly, a car doesn't get emotionally attached to you the more you test drive it. 3, a car doesn't get heartbroken, so it doesn't have feelings that you need to respect or protect. So you see that likening sex to test driving a car is such a bad analogy. Why? Because the two things that you are talking about as the woman and the car are very different things. So first things first, let's drop that bad analogy.
And then you might ask, well, why do you need to commit to your partner in front of your community and a higher authority, let's say? And the answer is, well, life is really, really difficult, and you're going to have a rough time with your partner, no matter how much you love them, because the two of you are different, and you're different sexually, and you're different temperamentally, and so you're not going to see eye to eye all the time, and then horribly difficult things are going to come your way, and the complexity of those difficult things is going to tempt you to pull apart. And exactly when pulling apart might be the worst possible thing for you, and maybe you need that vow before your community and God himself, let's say, or at least the state, and the vow that you've made to yourself and your partner, and the vow that you've made publicly to all your friends to keep you together when the going gets rough.
This particular point resonated with me so much because I'm engaged at the moment and I'll be married soon. And one thing that I realized after getting engaged was I didn't know that I had a coping mechanism in my mind where I was going to remain with a person, I was committed to a person, but when it gets to a point where I can't take it anymore, I will leave. So one time when I had an argument with my partner, I think we were having a rough patch basically, I got to a point where it was like, you know what? I love you and I'm willing to be here for you and all of that good stuff. But that was just in my heart. But if this gets to a point where I can't take it anymore, I am out. And I then remembered that, wait, I've given this girl a ring. I can't just leave. When I say that realization was so funny to me. It was until I got engaged and then it sprung up that I realized, oh, this idea is not compatible with marriage. It can't work. And that's a fundamental difference between cohabitation and making an actual commitment. You can't just up and leave, and it's a fundamental difference.
And you might say, well, you don't need that. And I would say, well, that's just because the going hasn't got rough enough for you yet. Because when it does get that rough, you'll bloody well know that you needed that. That's for sure. And that will definitely happen to you. That will definitely happen to you if you marry someone, because all the things that life can throw at you will be thrown at you in the course of a marriage. And so the vow and the community commitment, you don't just throw that away casually. And you certainly don't say, well, that's just a piece of paper. You know, what do I need a piece of paper to validate my love? It's like, your love's that great, is it? You're really that much of a saint that this person, they can just, you say you love them and oh man, they're just done. They're in bliss. They're in paradise for the rest of their life. They can just rely, you're never going to waver. Now that you expressed your love, you're just going to be there 100% of the time. You don't need anyone else to help you. You don't need a vow. You don't need any tradition. So your love is so pure and holy that other person, they can just rely on you from that second onward. No hesitation. It's like, yeah, right. That's just complete bloody rubbish. You can't even rely on yourself in relationship to yourself for that. So...
this guy finished me in this video. How many New Year's resolutions have you made? That till now, 7 years has passed. You have not yet kept that New Year's resolution that you made to yourself. Then you said we should not sign contract. It's just a piece of paper. Take my word for it. Go and tell that to your New Year's resolutions. Go and tell that to your New Year's resolutions. It's just a piece of paper. We need it. We need it. Receive wisdom.
What are you telling your partner? Well, as far as I can tell, if you live with someone, here's what you're saying to each other. You're the best I can manage at the moment. And maybe the same applies to me for you, and we both really don't want to take on any more responsibility than necessary. Plus, we both want to have the option of trading up if opportunity comes along. And so why don't we just make do with this provisional arrangement while we cast our eye out into the broader world and see if we can fish something better in. And, you know, you can say I'm cynical about that, but I don't think I'm cynical about that. Because living together means something like, well, we're not permanently committed, and not permanently committed means, well, we're impermanently committed, and impermanently committed means we're looking for a better commitment. Or perhaps to be alone, but forget that, because that's usually not true. Well, what kind of basis is that to have a relationship with someone? How are you going to found a relationship on that? I don't think that's a very solid foundation to allow you to move forward. And then it's indeterminate too. It's, well, if you're just living together, do you have kids? Because that's a commitment, that's for sure, and that's a real commitment, or it better be, and it's going to be inevitably anyways. And so if there's ambiguity about your commitment to each other, there's going to be ambiguity about your plans for children, and that's a huge ambiguity in most relationships, and so that's not helpful. That just means neither of you know what the hell you're doing, and that provokes anxiety and uncertainty, and it decreases hope, because hope is experienced in relationship to a goal, and if the goal is ambiguous, maybe we'll have kids and maybe we'll not, well then there's no real hope there. And so that seems to be a pretty decent pathway to misery.
Oh, this man. Cohabitation. Cohabitation is literally a breeding ground for anxiety. Why? Because it is full of uncertainty. Cohabitation is, let's see how it goes, on steroids. It's like when you meet someone that is uncertain about you, that doesn't have like a plan for you, doesn't know where he wants to go, she doesn't know where she wants to go with this, it's just it's just ambiguous, let's see how it goes. That's bad enough. When you're like, you still live in your house and you're just going on dates, your emotions get intertwined, but obviously it's going to end in heartache because it's going nowhere. But with cohabitation, it's like a million times worse because you're a million times more invested. You live with this person. You're doing so much more for this person. You're invested on a different level and still going nowhere. They hide behind this, I want to make a more informed decision, but that's not the case. If sex is the metric you're using to decide whether you want to marry someone or not, haven't you had great sex? Why didn't you marry that person? Why didn't you marry the person you had great sex with the last time you had it? You want to look for better sex? And if that's the case, then when does it end? When do you become sure? At what point have you gathered enough empirical evidence to make a decision? Never. So it genuinely is just a breeding ground for confusion. You're just there uncertain about where you are going. Uncertain about where you are going with this person.
You're not married if you're living together. And so you might say, well, you're practicing being married. It's like, no, you're not. Why? Because it's not something you can simulate. So one of the things I learned from reading Carl Jung thought about marriage as a container, as a container for alchemical transformation, as a container that would produce a heat so intense that the base metal of your psyche could be transformed into something ideal. But it had to be a container that could take heat, because it requires heat to transform. And you might say, well, how much heat does someone as base as you need to transform? And the answer might be, a lot of heat. I need a lot of heat and pressure before I'm going to change, before I'm going to become purified in any real sense. And so what's the heat and pressure? Here's what it is. You don't get to run away. You're stuck with that person. And they're stuck with you. And you made a vow. It's like, uh-oh, I'm stuck with you. Just like I'm stuck with me. And the vow is exactly that, right, in some real sense.
And when he said this year, so many things added up for me. So many things I've seen in scripture began to make sense to me. You will see verses in scripture that say that, husband, your body is no longer your own, you yield it over to your wife. Wife, your body is no longer your own, you yield it to your husband. Or when scripture says that the husband should consider the wife as his own body. Like whatever you are doing to your wife, you are doing to yourself. So marriage is so deep a commitment. It is literally like the commitment you have to yourself. Like the way you cannot run away from yourself, even when you feel like rubbish, even when you hate yourself, you made a very stupid set of decisions and you feel like crap and you just want to escape your own body, that kind of thing. Even when you feel like that, you still feed yourself. You still go and look for food to eat when you are hungry. Why? Because even though I hate myself at this point in time, I'm going to make sure I don't starve to death. Why? Because that's a commitment you have to yourself, self-preservation. And that is what marriage is like. The commitment you have to yourself, to taking care of yourself. Husband, your wife, your wife is yourself.
The vow is, I'm going to treat you like you're me. And you don't even like yourself very much, so that's a vicious vow. And so you might say, well, how desperate do you have to be when confronted by someone else to change your ways? And the answer might be, well, you have to be as desperate as being shackled to someone makes you. You know, one of the reasons that Tammy and I have got along and are still together is because we both know that we're stuck with each other. And so we decided quite a long time ago that we didn't want to have the same stupid fight every day for the next 40 years. And so that's like the definition of a bad marriage. It's like we have the same fight every day for 40 years. That's hell. And so the alternative is, now let's just have a bloody fight right here and now and see if we can sort out whatever the hell is so stupid about us that's keeping us in this dismal hell. And why? Well, because otherwise we're just stuck with this misery. And if you can walk away and if you can leave, which you can if you're not bound together, then you're not going to withstand the horrible process of heat and pressure that's required to make you transform. You'll just walk around that. You'll just look for an excuse. I mean, people look for an excuse not to do that anyways. And so part of the reason you get married is so you're desperate enough to change.
The main point that you need to take away from what he just said now is that cohabitation is not a simulation of marriage. That assumption is literally a foundational, if not the foundational assumption behind cohabitation. It's like, oh, I want us to live together so that I can know if we'll be good when we are married, if we are compatible for marriage. Cohabitation is not a simulation of marriage because you still have the option to live. The very thing that makes marriage is absent in cohabitation, which is what? The commitment.
It's a necessary act of faith. And, you know, in our culture...
Guys, I'm so sorry. Literally paused it at the first statement, but that statement brought me all the liberation that I needed for this particular topic. It made everything make sense. You see, we think that cohabitation is going to remove or take care of that element of faith that comes with marrying a person. But it cannot. And he will explain it a lot more in the clip, and I'll allow him to. But we think that cohabitation will help us make so much of an informed decision that we will not need faith to marry a person. But it's not correct. It's not true. Marriage is an act of faith. Marrying someone is an act of faith. Yes, it can be an informed decision based off of better metrics, based off of useful metrics that actually tell you whether or not you have a chance of living long with this person. What's the idea of faithfulness? What are their convictions around loyalty, honor, respect, love? What do they think about these concepts genuinely and personally, not because of what they've been taught? What's their personal conviction? When you know these things and your convictions are shared, you know that you have a better chance. You're making a more informed decision. But the most important thing that I realized from this statement is that marriage is an act of faith. And cohabitation is not going to make it any less an act of faith.
Because we're not very wise. We think that faith means, especially when it's parodied as religious faith. We think faith means the willingness to suspend disbelief while swallowing a proposition that any fool would reject. That's often how the rationalist atheists view religious claims. Faith means the suspension of your rationality and the acceptance of an absurd claim. But that isn't what faith means. Not really. Faith is what makes movement into the unknown possible. And you need to move into the unknown because that's where you're moving. And because the unknown is unknown, because the future is unknown, you cannot step forward into the unknown without faith. It wouldn't be unknown if you knew it. If you knew it, it wouldn't require faith, but you don't know it. And so you step forward into the unknown future as a consequence of your faith in some principles. And if you love someone, if you fall in love with someone and you decide to marry them, you don't have the evidence at hand that that's the right person for you. What you have instead is the joint decision that come hell or high water, you're going to struggle forward together. And then you don't even know if that's the right decision. Because you're not going to know till you've been married, like your whole life. You're not going to have the data. And so you do have to throw yourself into the abyss to be married. Just like you have to throw yourself into the abyss to be alive. You have to move forward in faith. And then you might say, well, how do you call the best out of yourself and out of your partner, that may be a partner that you're fortunate enough to love? And the answer might be by offering them the gift of faith. And by saying, look, flawed as we both are, if we commit to each other, we have the possibility of becoming more than we are. And I'd like to do that with you, even though there's no evidence that it's going to work. But then you might think too, the more deeply you're committed to that faith, the more likely it is to work. And you can't find out what that commitment is without the commitment, and so you can't simulate it by living together, because it's not real. It's not real until you make the commitment. And then I would also say, well, what if you don't make the commitment? Well, then you're not committed. And you might say, well, why should I be committed? Well, what's the alternative? It's to be uncommitted. Well, are you free then? Or are you just aimless and hopeless and confused? And you admire people who are committed to something. You sort of wish yourself, when you're feeling aimless and you feel that your life is meaningless, you might think, well, I really wish I was committed to something. Wouldn't it be nice to be committed to something? It's like, well, commit to something then. And you say, well, I don't have the evidence. It's like, you don't commit because of the evidence. You commit because of faith.
Oh, goodness. Oh! Oh! Wisdom. Wisdom. Cohabitation is not a simulation of marriage. It's not. What makes marriage is the commitment. Marriage is an act of faith. There are no corners to cut. You have to make an informed decision based off of principles, based off of metrics that actually matter. What is their conviction about the most fundamental things? Faithfulness, loyalty, love. And then trust that if both of you share this conviction and are working toward a similar goal of having a long, wonderful, beautiful marriage, a beautiful time living together, that you can accomplish that. No matter how you want to try and make an informed decision, it doesn't make it any less an act of faith. You can't remove that element of faith from marrying a person. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, subscribe. I'm going to be making a lot more content like this This video definitely will, if it blessed you, it will bless somebody else. So please share it with somebody, share it with a friend, share it with a couple of friends. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.